Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's the first meeting in the new municipal year of this committee, so welcome.
Okay, so item number 8 is the Climate Emergency Action Plan 5th report to scrutinise the 5th annual update of the Climate Emergency Action Plan. Now, Alex.
Hi, I've got quite a few questions. I think probably a lot of them will be quite simple answers because it will just be a lack of my understanding. It mentioned at the start of the report that future adverse changes in the energy market would be investigated. So do we know what the results of that investigation were? So the Barkham Solar Farm being a 25-year plan, it said that consideration against future adverse changes in the energy market would be investigated. So has this been done? And if so, what were the results of that investigation?
So unfortunately, the energy team who will be best placed to, I think, answer that question, they're not on the call, but we can take that away with some of the other related Barkham questions and solar farm questions and come back to you on that one.
Sorry, I didn't press the button properly. Apologies. The carbon sequestration, I don't know, again, I've only been a councillor for 2 months and I was reading this report, I was trying my best. It seemed quite low. And one of the things I read about recently was the how useful wetlands can be, and sort of peatbogs, I think they refer to them as. So there's lots of them in Scotland. I think they take up, I was reading, they take up 3% of the Earth's land mass, and they offset more carbon than all of the trees on the planet. So they're like 10 or 15 times better at offsetting carbon than planting trees. So there's a lot of stuff later on in the report about flood management. I just wondered if there were any wetlands that currently exist in the borough and whether or not anyone has investigated rehydrating them. I don't know that that's the official terminology, but if anybody's looked into bogs and wetlands as a means of offsetting our carbon yet.
I know that we do have wetland areas, particularly around by California Country Park, but I think what we'd need to do is probably speak to our trees and our biodiversity team and ask them. Some of them are areas of specific scientific interest, and so they're protected. But that is a really good point, that they do act as a carbon sink and they're quite powerful in doing so. But I'm not sure that we've got anyone in the call again from the biodiversity team. Have we, Mary? Or
no, we don't.
Got an answer?
Just looking at this, yeah, there is an action on 4.24, which is it mentions about creation of wetland habitats it's the Developer Natural Flood Management Partnership Scheme. So it is currently at red, that one. And the reason for that is because a lot of the team in that area is focused on the reactive work. But there's definitely that kind of, they recognise, the benefits of wetland habitats, and that's why it's in the CAP. So as we, we've got here, there is a initial focus looking at Hurst and looking at the feasibility around that. So hopefully that will progress and we can provide updates on that, as kind of more that moves forwards. And then I guess it's kind of, if that works, it's then scaling it, isn't it, to get the bigger benefits.
Just from my day job, which is partly looking at natural climate solution carbon offset projects, I'm pretty sure we don't have any peatland or large areas, certainly within the borough. But of course, wetlands, we do have a significant sort of flood area. So great that it's in the action plan.
Yeah, I would say that in terms of, as well, cost benefit, money in versus CO2 removed, the fact that it's in red is a bit disappointing, I guess, because it should be an area where we can, in theory, spend not as much money and get a lot out of it. The next question, there was a home working study done into essentially I assume about people's working habits, the fact that most jobs now are listed as hybrid, and trains are basically transporting air around the country on Mondays and Fridays. I wondered if there was any interesting findings from that, and because I think, post-pandemic, the fact that people's working habits are changing, is that helping us out? Is that hindering us? Because obviously you've got to heat your homes if you're working in there during the winter, but equally you're not driving to work. So I wondered if there were any interesting findings from that.
Yeah, I think that was a broader study, but the specific findings on home working, I think where we're at with home working is that kind of, so we haven't actively promoted it because we recognise there's lots of other factors to consider. So things like, people's well-being and getting out and about and having conversations with people in the office. So I've spoken with our economic development head of economic development around this action and thinking, actually, what do we do around it? And so we haven't progressed it because it's not as there's lots of stuff to think about with it, with home working. I think within that climate change committee report, linking back to the transport side of things, and at that national level, I think there was this finding that actually the travel and the traffic on the roads, it hasn't gone back to pre-pandemic levels. So I think we know that traffic has reduced from home workings, but it's not we're not actively promoting it.
Thank you. On page 57, it talks about the Community Energy Fund for Wokingham. It said it was on hold due to staff issues. I don't know if this is a confidential question to ask, but I just wondered what that meant.
No, and this is something we've picked up internally. So this was something that internally it was being led previously from the energy team at Wokingham, but we've we recognise they don't have the capacity, so it's something we're going to take on to progress for next year. So the Climate Emergency team will hopefully progress that. So hopefully next year that won't be read, and we'll have more progress on that.
Okay. Page 82 talks about the risk register. This is more of a broad question, but is there anything in particular that's slowing down the completion of the risk register? Is there anything that's because that's listed as amber, is there anything in particular that's preventing that from being green?
So we're looking at that from an internal perspective. It's been looked at, it hasn't been picked up, and that's just from a prioritization point of view. We are also looking at potentially doing a wider cross Berkshire adaptation plan. So that's we're looking at within the University of Reading strategic partnership, whether we can, and also potentially through the Prosperity Board, there's opportunity to work together, because it feels like it makes sense for the adaptation to work with other authorities and not just do it on our own. So there's two reasons for that not progressing, partly because we're waiting for the Prosperity Board net zero workstream to evolve, because it's very early days, and also with the University of Reading it's early days for both of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then page 87 is about engagement with residents with regard to the new waste and recycling policy. Yeah. It's listed as green because leaflets were delivered, response times were improved on social media, etc., etc. What I would say is, and I think all the councillors in this room can probably agree with me, is because we had all up elections, it was by far the most contentious issue at the doorstep throughout the entire election. I almost couldn't get away from talking about bins for the entire 6 months I was campaigning. So, and there was, whilst this has been done, and I think you can as a box ticking exercise go, well, it's green because we've done this. I sort of think that there was so little understanding from residents when I spoke to them about what the policy actually was and what the results of it were. And for example, I didn't even consider the positive environmental impacts of the policy. We put out a newsletter because we were getting told off about it on the doorstep. And so we put out a newsletter saying, well, the reason the Labour group supported this policy is because it saves X amount for the council budget, which enables us to spend more money on children's services and adult social care. That was the argument we put forward, and we got all three of us elected, I suppose, so it worked. But I think it was such a contentious issue, and it seemed that a lot of residents were not, well, even me, even as a councillor, I was not aware of the environmental impact of it. So how did you evaluate the communication that you did with local residents? Because I think from my perspective, I would have that as amber, because I think whilst it was done, the communication was received, I don't think it was heard by people.
Yeah, so again, we haven't got someone from Waste on the call, so we can't, I don't know, the information on that evaluation process. Again, we can take it away and provide some information on that evaluation. I know they recruited some engagement officers to help in the promotions. They have I know there was a big kind of focus on the engagement side of stuff, but yeah, I can check on the evaluation side of things and what happened, what they did and around that.
Okay, yeah, so there was all the consultation stuff first, and again, similar to the actual figures, we will monitor. There is stuff in place to monitor the progress of it. So in 6 months or however long it is, there should be figures coming back from that, and how well the engagement stuff has gone as well. That's included.
Thank you. Sorry if I'm taking up a lot of time here. The page 90 talks about engagement with schools and recycling. I remember my own experience of this at primary school was it was drilled into me at a very early age that climate change is a huge issue and that we need to do something about it. And I would say that's largely true for all people that are Gen Z. I think Gen Z are all acutely aware of the issues of climate change, and I think that is largely because of a very successful educational campaign to raise awareness of it. I wondered whether or not that is still the case for Gen Alpha, as they're known, and how much attention is being given to primary schools rather than secondary schools, because I think you will have more of an effect at a primary school level than at a secondary school level. By the time you get to secondary school, people's habits are fairly entrenched and people sort of lose interest in it. I think if you can get kids kind of invested in the issue early on, you're likely to see quite a big impact in behaviour.
From the schools I'm aware of that the Waste team have gone into, it is primary schools. I think it's generally easier to get into primary schools than secondary schools, so that works well then with that kind of thinking.
Okay, and
can we just let someone else have a go? I'll probably come back to you later. Catherine. Thank you. So we got any more questions? Oh, Alex.
So I've only got three more. The first one, I should have actually started with this. The graph, which shows the green, orange, and whatever the other colour is going down. The orange one is us or our plan. The years is cut off, so you can't see when ours hits the origin, which is quite an important thing, because obviously you can look at it in terms of how far away we are in terms of carbon reduction, but actually I think the thing that matters is how many years behind are we from being net zero. So do we know when that line touches the origin? Do we know when it actually hits zero according to our current estimates?
It's an interesting one here. We hadn't done it that way. There's obviously lots of different ways of presenting the data. We could have a look at that kind of metric. Yeah.
Because I sort of crudely drew a line myself, and it looks like it's sort of about 5 years. But anyway, like I say, the second question is page 107, the questionnaire that businesses have to fill out, and it mentions as well in there that this will be used for new contracts. We've got quite a big contract that is being presented at full council related to recycling and waste collection. It says the questionnaire is optional. So my question is it possible to secure a bid from Wokingham Borough Council without filling out the questionnaire? Because if so, then I don't really see the point of it.
So I think, again, we did discuss this at the previous meeting. If you, and obviously you're new. No, it's okay. I know you're new. So yeah, it is optional, and that's because it's only an initial stage, because we are still gathering information on all of that. And I think it was mentioned earlier that we will progress that, and the aim is to make that compulsory. But for the waste one you're mentioning, we are working closely with the team to ensure, obviously because it's so linked to climate emergency, that we are including as much as we can there.
Right, and then my final one, which is sort of a fun one. Has anybody looked into electric scooters? Because I work in Oxford, and they've just renewed their electric scooter contract with Voy. I know that loads of people, whilst I was campaigning, canvassing to get myself elected, lots of people mentioned that young people are already on electric scooters, annoying people on the high street. So they're already illegally in use. I don't know if anybody's thought about potentially extending them for legal use. They are quite useful means of moving about without internal combustion.
So I can come in on this one. Electric scooters are currently illegal in the United Kingdom. There are, I think it's 12 trial areas, Oxford being one of them. And there is a lot of analysis going on about the accidents, about what needs to be done to see if it's feasible to make them legal. It was due to be reported on last year on whether the government would change their mind. It got extended. The near miss rate and the accident rate is extremely high. So they're trying to work out if they make them legal, and if they do, how can they make them safe? How can they make sure they're insured? How can they make sure that they are not going to increase the amount of accidents on our roads?
Okay, well, that makes sense. Cool. Thank you very much.
In previous years, the committee's comments and questions have been formulated into a document, which has then been submitted as part of the eventual report that goes to council. So that could be one step that we do. And obviously all the questions which couldn't be answered tonight, we will get those in there as well and make it into a comprehensive document with the committee's views, if members are happy with that.
Adrian.
So, yeah, very happy with it. What's the process by which that happens? Do we do the minutes first and then write a report from the minutes, or does someone have to write a report? How does that happen?
So I'll do the minutes, and then if members are happy with the minutes plus all the additional stuff, we'll just turn it into a report. We've done that in the past, so I'm practiced at doing that.